Hi, my name is Nicole Nagelli, and today I have Lindsey Olivares with me.
Hi, glad to be here, Nicole.
Do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
My name is Lindsey Olivares, and I recently just production design and character design for the Mitchells versus the Machines. I've always loved art. Before that, went to school for animation, worked in visual development for a while, and ended up with a great opportunity to production design the Mitchells. And it's been super exciting to have it out and released and get some good feedback from people. So excited to talk more about that and everything with Nicole today.
Yay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, here is the icebreaker question. What is your favorite quote, but put it in your own words?
Oh gosh. Okay, I think I got one. So I guess I don't know the exact quote, but there's a quote by Ira Glass that I really liked about continuing to make art and bad art. Like, as you're an artist because you have good taste and a good eye. And as you make art,
right,
it's always going to be falling short of that. And then as you keep going, that gap closes. And I thought that was like a really beautiful quote, because it's so true. And it can be so discouraging sometimes to make art and not be happy with it. So to make art that you don't like and make bad drawings until your hand is kind of catching up with your head.
I took Mike Miranda's story class a while back, and he was also talking about like his version of like walking over the corpses of like failed projects. It was really very interesting.
Yeah.
What role has fear played in your mindset towards art?
It has and it hasn't. I think I've been good at avoiding fear. Like, it's not that it's not there. I think everybody can have like insecurities or fear in their art, but I find that sometimes I'm not the best at being motivated by fear. I know that I think some of Mike's advice, and I think in that class that you talked about, I feel like sometimes he'll I think use it well. I feel like I've never used it that well to motivate me. I can find it kind of distracting, or I feel like I make different choices when I am afraid. Like, if I, for example, like for the Mitchells, if I were really thinking really carefully about the responsibility of it all, and like wanting to make a really amazing movie, and how is it going to compare to all these other movies, and what are people going to think about it, like what are people going to think about like me as I'm giving notes and feedback. Like, if I were to really spend too much time with that, I don't know that I personally would do my best work. Like, I don't do my best work out of insecurity. Then I feel like I'm like, what are other studios doing or other projects doing, and how can I be like that but different? So I usually distract myself with like storytelling and stuff, and kind of like laser focus in on the story I want to tell, or some reason to make something, so that I can like avoid the fear, because it doesn't really matter. Like, if my goal is very specific about visualizing this story, or maybe it's a personal project, I'll usually make things that are a personal story or something that might be meaningful to like a family member. And then there's no real fear in it, because I was doing it for some other reason. Where if I'm doing something to be like a beautiful portfolio piece, or to be a beautiful, like that kind of fear, I think can kind of distract me or inhibit my choices. So I usually just distract myself from it, so that it's like not as present.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic response. That's something that I actually go through too, especially when I first started acting. Like, I was more motivated by fear, like, how am I looking while I'm doing this? Am I like outward focused? And that never really worked for me until like I started doing until I started making stuff. Like, I wasn't like, until I started like giving myself the roles that I wish I could play, that sort of stuff. Same thing with art. then I
Yeah.
started to be like, oh wait, it's not about like trying to prove yourself to someone. It's about just making a thing and then despite the response that other people give, just like sharing it and like believing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. How does fear affect your work and how do you combat it?
I guess I'm more for like my day job work or work in general, like artwork.
Let's do both.
Um, well, I wonder if it's kind of the same answer. Like for fear, I feel like it's kind of the same thing. Like for fear in my job, I had some elements of it, but I think I just kept the goals in mind of what I was needing to do and to get accomplished, and let the kind of my what was exciting to me drive me. I think more than letting fear hold me back from anything. Like for a movie like for Mitchell's, there could have been fear with like the stylization. Like, is that going to make it feel, like cheap in some way if it's not pulled off right? Because you have times when you're like working it out and it's not quite there yet.
Mhm.
And I think there's a world where you could see something in that journey it's on to get to be the cool thing. It's kind of like that gap we talked about. And it could be possible to be like afraid of it because sometimes things that are cool, like something just like that doesn't exist before. So you don't know like how people might react to it. Like there are times that I didn't know like if people are gonna, like the characters or think they're ugly or think that, something about the look. But I feel like that you have like strong convictions about things and you take those risks that there's gonna be ambiguity. You're not gonna know what people are gonna think about it. But if you have your reasons for doing it and you just kind of like, I don't know, jump into the unknown or something. And if you have a reason to do it and you really commit to the ideas, I mean, I feel like it works a lot of the time, like it's just great to get fear out of art because art's this like, I don't know, it's this like cool outside thing that we're really lucky to get to work in. And it's nice to just let it get to find new ground and make new choices with it and try new things with it. Cause it's a big thing that's exciting about art, like how it exists in its time and how, art or animation this time. A big part of it too, I think with each project that comes out is how can you kind of push the medium forward? How can you try new things? And it's hard to do that if you're like afraid of trying something different. So yeah, I think it's a little bit about, taking those leaps and then having a good reason to do those different choices. And usually then other people can get excited to hop on that like ride with you. And in personal work, I think I guess there can be some elements of fear. Like the thing that comes to mind specifically with like non-animation work is I like caricature a lot. I like I like just caricatures of people. Like I've done a little bit of live caricature. I haven't quite done it professionally, but I used to draw caricatures of my friends at work. And then I found out something that I liked and I considered like, could I do this? And I started going to this caricature convention and I did conventions where I would do caricatures and I started doing caricatures at CTN and different animation events. I've had some opportunities to do some like visiting friends who were doing characters at a fair or at the boardwalk. So I've had some experiences both with like animation kind of colleagues, people in the industry, and then people that have nothing to do with animation.
Yeah.
And so with caricature, you're drawing, it's so personal. You're drawing somebody and they're being generous enough to kind of trust you with that. And, there's a lot of times where, like they might not like it. Like there's definitely a lot of space for fear when you're like, here's what I think you look like.
Yeah.
And so that I feel like is the space that I've probably experienced the most like valid fear. And I don't even know what my advice for that is. It's like, it's similar to the story thing, I guess, where I try to get a little like objective about it. It's not really me making it like too much of a judgment or point of view. I think it's just kind of taking people being excited about different people and all the ways we look different. And that I've kind of thrown away like I don't know, like a traditional standard of beauty. And I feel like I just think all people are, I don't know, interesting in their own ways.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
feel like it's great to just celebrate different real people. And we did a bit of that in the Mitchells too. And I think I just love observing people. I love all the ways that we're kind of unique and different. And so I just get this kind of addiction to trying to capture a face, trying to capture a personality, finding ways to abstract shapes. And so I'm just kind of on this quest to try to capture that. And, you know, there's times that you do it and you get it right, and it can feel more like the person than a photo, or people are like laughing and enjoying it. And so that kind of chase for likeness kind of drives me. But there's definitely times when, like, you know, you can tell maybe someone doesn't like it, or maybe you've made them uncomfortable or something. And it's never the intent to make people uncomfortable. I always hope that if you can draw somebody that does look like them in an honest way, and not like they don't look like them and you've given them like some standard appeal. If you can do that, I feel like it's actually like a little bit more beautiful, because you can see yourself, and in this kind of maybe semi-cartoony designy way. And if it can totally be you and it's cool and you like it, I feel like that's a great way to kind of celebrate yourself and people. So I usually have that as a goal that I chase. And usually it can kind of like keep me protected from that fear of like, what is this person going to think of you know, me or my drawing. And I think there's more times that it goes well than not. And then you're kind of, it's a mix of trying to chase the art form, but in that case, trying to not, for me, not trying to chase the art form so much that I'm like, you know, being mean or something, but how can you really push stylization and capture someone and do it in a cool way that we can be excited about our differences and unique features.
Yeah, that is so exciting. That's one of the things like I really enjoy about your character designs and your caricatures, especially caricatures.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've only ever read the word, but like especially in like the Mitchells versus the Machines and stuff. Usually like cartoon animated like girls, they all like have the same copy pasted like faces with like different hair color. But like I love that the character designs on this film, and like it's a very obvious that like they're different, and like it's just so cool because it's not like standard like we're gonna slap a Disney princess button nose on this one and call it good. It's just so cool to see like real people reflected. You did that like so well.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, so I really would love some clarification. So if it's not fear that motivates you, why do you do this, or like what actually motivates you?
I think I've always liked to make art, and I don't know, I love finding different applications for it. I think animation is such a great place for it, because you can kind of be a little bit bigger than yourself making a singular image. You can, you know, make a movie that, like, this has been so cool to be so close to a project and have it released and see like how global it is and how many people see it. And so I've loved making art for like the impact that it can have. And I think art, especially in animation, has such a huge amount of that, because you're not just doing an image, but you're collaborating with people that, you know, do all the parts of the process, all the way to, you know, like voice talent and music that comes together to make stuff that can really reach out to people in like a huge emotional, meaningful way. And so I feel like that just feels like a cool thing to be a part of. And in personal work, yeah, I like to make art, and I think it's a nice way to filter things, like to filter through, I don't know, like your experiences and memories, and, you know, like whether it's traveling and drawing it to kind of capture how it felt, or drawing a person to kind of, I don't know, capture your relationship with them or something. I feel like I've done some stuff too that ends up being like a little therapeutic, to either, whether it's getting like an idea out or just a drawing out. So I feel like it's just like a nice thing to do, you know, as a person. Like, you can kind of like, it's a nice outlet, and I really like it for that. I feel like it's a nice way to kind of organize, I don't know, your thoughts and reactions to like to life.
Wow, I love that a lot. So like the Mitchells versus the Machines is pretty much my new favorite movie. I
Oh,
have like
cool.
stickers of like Katie on my sketchbook and my skateboard and like literally everywhere. I think I've
Yeah.
watched it like 9 times so far.
Nice.
But the thing that I love is that the humor is so like accurate. Like I was almost relieved that I couldn't watch this movie in the theaters because I would definitely
Mm.
get kicked out for laughing too much. Like it was just so fantastic. Like my what was I trying to say? So my little brother like laughs so much and at
Mhm.
deregulate tapioca, and I'm just like, it's so funny that you guys got like the Gen Z humor like completely right. And I'm
Cool.
wondering, how did you guys develop that? Because a bunch of other movies that try to be that kind of thing, they get
Yeah,
it like
yeah.
completely wrong. But like deregulate tapioca sent me over the edge for like a week.
It's funny that in particular, I can't really speak too much to the story of that, like that joke. But I think in general, I feel like if we got it right, like we, we're a mix of millennials and I guess mostly kind of millennials um and above, I guess. But I think we weren't trying to capture Gen Z. I feel like that's feels inauthentic. You know what I mean? Like when I don't know if we're trying to be like, what's really cool right now? I don't know if that ever would have worked. Like we were never like
Mhm.
on TikTok taking notes or anything like
Yeah,
that.
that's the thing that I love because it just showed up so like authentically and naturally, and I was like
Yeah.
losing my mind. It was great.
Yeah. Like I think a lot of that, credit goes to like Mike Rianda and Jeff Rowe. And,
Mhm.
Mike put a lot of him, I feel like it was putting a lot of himself into it and his feelings and experiences and putting a lot of himself into Katie and capturing like how things feel. And it's always more character first and moment first and relationship, and she's making videos and using things. And I guess there's some things might be a little bit more, maybe they're observed from the internet. um we didn't like have conversations of like how do we capture the trends. I
Mhm.
think it was like how do we capture Katie and Katie's art styles, how we talked about it. And like for me, when I was kind of coming up with like a style for what we call Katie vision and her art and pop-ups and films, there were some cues I was taking from like Instagram stories. It wasn't so much like high school kids in particular, but just like the tools that you have available and like how like your storytelling, you're curating your life and you're choosing which photographs, and you might put things on your story and your feed, and there's an element of that that's kind of like editing. It's kind of like a book or something. Like there's an element of like storytelling that happens in online and in social media, whether you're kind of conscious of it or not. And like while we were making a movie about tech and Silicon Valley, big tech company type characters, it's also really not how we experience tech. We experience it on our phones, and we're real people, and we're having FaceTime calls with our family, and we're posting Instagram pictures and stuff. So it felt also like that was a part of it to also to show that. And I was looking at like Instagram stories where you're layering gifs and different fonts and stuff, and that kind of collage feel that it has. So I feel like we had an approach that kind of mimicked that in a way, where yeah, there's like some live action elements mixed in things that feel kind of like stock photos. That mixed quality and like mixed resolution that you get from things on the internet are in there. So it's supposed to have like some influence that it feels like she's using modern tools and is a 18-year-old girl in 2020 or whatever. But I think we were chasing authenticity more than the trends in particular. So if it's landing as authentic, that's like, that's really great. And so much of that too is, I don't know, I guess just like Mike and Jeff's humor, I think fits well. And I think I'm kind of curious their thoughts on fear, but they're so kind of original and bold, and to me always felt so fearless with their ideas of like having a giant Furby
Yeah.
and the kind of bold
Or like
ambition
the
that we
Tickle
can,
Me Elmo or whatever. That was so funny.
yeah, like There's so many things. It sounds like, yeah, you've seen some of the like outtakes. There's so many, and they're never like cut because they're bad. Like everything they did in the story team, and Guillermo Martinez was the head of story and really brilliant. Everything's hilarious. Like everything's amazing, and then they kind of find the things that work best for the story. But yeah, their ideas are so like, yeah, they feel fearless to me. It doesn't feel like they're thinking about exactly how they'll land at a big studio or how they'll be received. I feel like they make really bold choices, and they make them in ways that push the story forward. And I think that hopefully all lands really well too.
Oh, definitely. It definitely
Yeah.
comes across. I love that you can very much so like feel the passion that comes
Mm.
from the people that worked on this movie by like the Katie vision that you created. Oh my gosh, that I could go on about that forever, but that was so cool and it was so fun. And Mike said something about like how it's like a bunch of film kids like hijacked
Yeah,
a movie,
yeah.
and that's like so wonderful. I love like just the entire vibe that it is. I have to ask. So my little brother and I, we spent like 2 days decoding like the robot language from the
Oh,
film, and I have to know. I have it here. I gotta show it to you because it's really really fun. Yeah, here we are. I drew us
Awesome.
as
Yeah.
like the caricatures.
I love
Yeah, it's
it.
so cute. Like I love it's so cool. Like my favorite thing that I found so far in decoding was the knock knock, who's there? A human. Whoops, we missed one. Ha ha ha. It's just so funny. And like unless you take the time to like put your or decode it, you never see it. That's just so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
But yeah, the question I wanted to ask was when you encounter like a problem, either in like your
Mhm.
life or in art, but mainly art, what's your first thought usually?
Mm. Um, that's a good question. I I'm trying to think like if it's like an example from the movie.
Or just
I
in
don't know.
general?
In
Because I've had
general,
people like, oh, I just scream in my head, which is kind of what I do. But other people are like, what has someone said? Like, some people like berate themselves, and some other people are like so focused on the goal where they're like, how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? Kind of
yeah, I
stuff.
don't know. I guess it depends. Like with art, I don't know if I should say work or art or creative things. I think I am kind of goal oriented and try to think about how to solve them. But I'm trying to wonder. I don't know, honestly, like with my in like life, if I have problems, I don't know. Like maybe there's like that time of I don't know, beating yourself up or avoiding them or whatever. But I like to think that I yeah, try to then find that space of like giving yourself the space you can kind of figure out how to solve it and giving yourself like space for perspective. um so I guess that's it.
Oh,
I'm not
cool.
sure. I feel like this
Good
is a
answer.
question. I feel like this is a question where later I'll be in my life be like, oh, that's what I do.
And then we just like call on the interview again and just insert it here. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's totally cool. What were you scared of at the start of your career? Because you've worked in like a bunch of different places. It's so cool. What were you scared at the start of your career? And has that changed at all?
um it's probably changed. I'll just start with the start of my career. I started at DreamWorks right out of college, which was super, an amazing opportunity. But that was scary because I didn't feel like that equipped in a way. Like I got a great training and I studied computer animation at Ringling College of Art and Design. And I think it was really invaluable what I learned because I learned like the 3D pipeline, which was super helpful production designing because you're working with 3D teams. So I understood more of that. But I didn't really understand much about like visual development specifically. And we had classes about concept art and we did have like a drawing for animators class and stuff. But I feel like I was naturally a little better at that than like animating and lighting and the more technical stuff. And so for me, I'd kind of put the the visual development stuff, I would do it and try to do my best, but I'd kind of have to put it on the back burner just to kind of stay up to speed and stay afloat with the other things. And so I felt like I didn't have tons of experience, even like really painting in Photoshop. And then you're kind of starting out of school, and I was, fortunate that I got hired, and I feel like there was an element of like that they took a chance on me in a way. I think I feel like I had a solid thesis film and a lot of solid like sketchbook work, but I don't know that I had pieces that showed that I could do the job. Like I didn't have a portfolio that had clear set design, clear prop design. I didn't look like you could just throw me into production and I would go running. But my production designer, Kendall Cronkite, I feel like she saw that, oh, this person has the skills that she'll be able to learn those things. It'll be fine. And so there was, like that. She kind of hired me, put me on a project, and I started in visual development on Madagascar 3, and then kind of moved into production on that. And so it was a lot of like learning on the job, but it wasn't like an internship or a mentorship program. It was just kind of, I'm doing the job. And so at that point, I feel like there was a lot to learn, and I had a lot of really lovely coworkers that I learned a ton from. And so that was really great. It was great to be surrounded by like really brilliant peers. But I feel like at that point, I had more, you were saying, so you're saying to your original question.
Yeah. What were you scared of at the start of your
What was I scared
But
of?
I have like a quick follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, that was the question. I was just bringing it back.
Okay. Yeah. No, so I feel like I was just scared of like, I'm not gonna be able to do this, or I don't know how to paint in a good enough way that I can paint like a specific lighting idea. And I feel like I was kind of just scared of just not being able to do it, I guess.
Do you wish you had like more of a heads up, or like do you wish you had do you like learning on the job more, or do you wish you had more of a heads up before you started?
I think it was okay. It was okay. I kind of jumped into the deep end and learned on the job, which maybe I like that. I might have kind of done that as a production designer too. I feel like sometimes there is a lot you will just learn on the job, even if you were to maybe have more mentorship, or if I would have done a program that was more specific on visual development or concept art, maybe I'd be a little bit more prepared. But I think it's kind of okay to jump in, like. You mentioned quotes when we started talking, and there's also a good David Bowie quote. I'm not sure if you've heard it, but it's something about how does he say it? It's talking about like, if you're in a place where you can like you feel your feet touching the ground, you're not where you should be. And when you kind of step outside of your depth and you feel like your feet aren't touching the ground anymore, that's like exactly where you should be to do something interesting. And that's a really nice, he probably says it better, but that's like a really nice quote, I find, because it's kind of, like it might have been nice if I was a little bit felt safer, felt a little bit more confident in it. But there's a lot of people too that's one thing I found, where there's a lot of people too that are like, I can do this, and they haven't. And I feel like it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm not qualified enough, or have like imposter syndrome or something. And then there's people that are like, able to take that leap. And so I feel like there's times that I've been like, well, I want to do that too. You know what I mean? Like let me kind of have enough of that confidence that even if I don't, like for me, I guess there was maybe a similarity with being a first time production designer. I felt like I at the time I'd been working on the Mitchells for years as like a character designer and an artist, and we weren't a big team and there wasn't leadership staff to it. And so I was in a way doing parts of that job, but not in like a production way, and not like giving direction to other artists or anything. So I felt confident because I felt like I know what this movie like can be, and I feel like I know what feels right for it. And I felt like I had confidence because I had a good like taste match with the director. And so I had a certain level of confidence there, but I hadn't like, production design's a hard one. I don't know how you would like learn how to be a production designer, maybe in other leadership roles that are close to it.
Mhm.
but some of those leadership roles, like maybe it's whether you're a first time director, production design, some of those things, it feels like you're not going to quite know all the things until you do it. And it might be the same with anything. Like the version of the industry job is different than school, and you'll gain skills throughout your time working in other jobs and other projects. And then there's a point where you kind of like jump into the deep end, and there was, when I thought too much about it, there were times like that I wanted to be the production designer. And then it was like, what if I actually get this thing? Like, am I going to be able to do this? And I think I just kind of would be like, like kind of avoid those thoughts,
I love that you just like tossed it to the side.
Yeah. No, I definitely had those moments. And I think at that time, I don't know. I just felt it's like I said before, I was like excited enough about the story, and I felt like, I don't know, I felt like taking that risk with myself and kind of thinking like, well, why not? Why not? Why can't it be me? Or I think I could do this. Maybe let me try it.
Has that ever, what's like the worst and best scenario that's worked and like hasn't worked out for you? Or jumping off the deep end, I mean.
Oh, good question. I don't know that I have a great, I mean, there's things that I've like jumped into too much, maybe like overcommitted in my life. So your feet like really aren't touching the ground, and maybe you're like drowning a little bit, in like life. I guess I could imagine things where you're like, maybe I don't know, this is silly, but jumping into the deep end with like a recipe that's outside of your knowledge zone, and you just make something that's like bad, or you make a bad dish or something. But that's kind of like what we talked about at the beginning too, where you kind of need to make bad things before you make good things. I think with things like the Mitchells versus machines, it's kind of hard because you don't have like, it's a long process with a lot of people. So it's not like you're wanting to be making bad choices and stuff. But I think in the spaces that your feet aren't touching the ground, you're working with so many people that in the areas that were like outside of my depth and areas that I was struggling with, I wasn't alone in it. I had, an art director, Toby Wilson, and a lead lighting color designer, Dave Bleich, and my whole team of artists, that there's things that you lead and you have a point of view on, but it's a collaborative art. You don't have that same like risk as like yourself singularly doing something. If there's something that you're stumped on, it's kind of okay. Like if there's a set that you can't get to work out, if you're struggling to get to work out, it's not like it's just you designing it. You have an artist who's designing it. And if there's, my art team was amazing, and if they were to be struggling with it, we're all kind of struggling. Like we're all working together then. And my art director's doing like a rough model of it. They're looking at it together, and you figure things out together. So there's a lot of times where you're going to have design challenges that feel like too hard, but in that space, it feels like it's easy. Yeah, it's easier not to fail because there's that kind of support system of the team, and you're able to collaborate with people, and you're able to get, your director's giving you feedback, and you get a lot of honest feedback. And so you all kind of, you get there to, hopefully a good place. And then I think when it's not that team and it's just you, it's usually projects that are probably more short-term, like maybe it's an illustration or a drawing. And if they're bad, you're just doing bad drawings is fine. Like I've done plenty of bad drawings on the Mitchells or in my personal work, but you get better through it. So I don't know, the worst case, it's like part of the journey, I think, the worst
really
case
good
is
advice. Yeah. I really love that. Like I was talking to on another interview about the Jorge Gutierrez. He made like Book of Life and stuff. He said something on this panel like about the 10 bad films challenge, how you need to like get over. It's the same thing that we were talking about in the beginning, right? Like the gap and everything. Just like do the bad stuff and like get it out. Because honestly, also like making really bad art is like really fun too. Like intentionally bad art.
Yeah. Like, you can find things in it. I feel like I've done things that are like bad. So one example comes to mind, and it was something that like my coworkers at DreamWorks used to do way back when, where we had
Mhm.
like a blog challenge with a theme, and everybody would do an image for the month's theme. And the theme was like left-handed, like self-portrait. And I did like the like worst one. Like a lot of people did kind of a good job. They're all like really good artists and kind of did like a good job, and they were kind of like impressionistic or something. And
Mhm.
mine was like so weird. It was like really left, I'm right-handed. So it was very like left-handed and strange, but it was really funny. And I feel like at that point, I feel like a lot of people liked it. I have like good friends that were like cracking up about it, and they printed it out, and it's been in their house
Oh my
for
God, that's
years
hilarious.
and years. It's just like the dumbest drawing. And I remember that was a point for me where something clicked of like things that have humor, like I don't know, like they don't have to be perfect, but if they can have life and have humor, it, the that that's so much,
Mhm.
so I've had times where I've made kind of flawed things. I have a little series of drawings around that same era that I remember doing that were super like not perfect. And at the time my tablet wasn't working, and so it kind of had the quality of like drawing with a mouse or something. And they had a lot of like weirdness to them and humor. And I remember kind of at that point something was clicking about not always chasing perfection, but kind of chasing humor and story. um and so yeah, there can be things about me making bad art, and in another way I think having sketchbooks that you do drawings, they're not necessarily bad, but they're not meant for anybody to see. You're just kind of getting your eye and your hand in sync, and you're drawing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're trying to make bad drawings, but I think if you're less precious about being perfect as you practice and practice, you'll get where you're trying to get.
Yeah, for sure. What's your favorite way to make bad art?
um I think I don't know, I guess just to make it. And I guess it's confusing because I don't know like how often now I'm like trying for it to be bad. I guess I'm just not caring when it is. I don't know that I always post those things, but I think it's just doing it, and doing it freely and for yourself.
Yeah, it's really nice. That reminds me of like I used to have a lot of fun like doing blind contour drawing because they come
Mm-hmm.
out so funny. Like the eyes up
Yeah,
here and
yeah,
the other one's down here and it's like,
yeah,
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 all right.
yeah, yeah. And line contour is interesting because they're not really to show, but it's like to observe.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so, yeah, so that's like a great example of
Yeah.
it.
It's like
Yes.
so fun because there's like no pressure then. It's like just like all the focus goes into like how you're saying the actual like drawing part rather than like this has got to be perfect. So the final
Mm-hmm.
result, that sort of thing. Something I really, really love, and you've mentioned this in like you did this little animation series with like your grandma, and it was so cute. You were talking
Mm-hmm.
about like the layers of age and like
Mm-hmm.
specificity.
Yeah.
And it's like I spent like so long looking at those art. Like I think I told you
Oh,
like I
cool.
wish I could live in this because
Oh,
it's so
thank
nice. Like
you.
it's so yeah, it's just so real. Like you can't make that stuff up. And it's just it's beautiful. How do you bring that into the designs that you did? Like for example, the animations that you did, your personal work. I saw a lot of the same kind of things in like how you designed
Mm.
like Katie's room and all of her like different like blankets and like stuff like that. How is that?
Yeah.
Like how did you I don't know, mine your own life to find those kind of moments?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think withdrawing from my own life, I think in that I'm trying to capture real people and real places. And with animation, you're trying to make things feel like real people and places that aren't that aren't actually. So I think in the process of doing it with real people and real places, I think your eye can get better at editing, and I always say caricaturing. So I'd find like I would basically draw what's there, but there's some exaggeration that happens to make it feel more like itself. So sometimes that's like, in the kitchen, if I were to take a photo of it, it might not capture the kitchen as well as if I were to average or exaggerate from all of my memory of it and my feeling of it. So it might be like being specific about what's on the stove, or exaggerating the set dressing to kind of capture the space when a specific person's inhabiting it. So that sometimes it's like the lighting can help to kind of exaggerating things that are the most iconic. I talk about set dressing a lot, and I think it's really important, but I think it's also easy to be confused too with like a mess or clutter. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes that's right for the characters, but sometimes too, it's not necessarily about having tons of stuff in it, but that the things that are in it are all like the right things and really intentional. Like it could be a really bare set, but the type, and maybe that's part of it, maybe it's a character it's like a college dorm, or it's like their first apartment and they only have like an inflatable mattress. Like it's not like there's a ton of stuff, but there's a specific choice. And maybe there's like an empty ice cream tub next to it. Like you're starting to tell a story. So as far as bringing my life into that, you bring it in as it relates. So you have to know who your characters are. And some of that comes from like the script, or maybe there's like a show Bible, or it's a conversation with the director, and you're getting an idea of who the person is. And I find there's either places in my life that I overlap with it, or somebody I know that overlaps with that character. And the things that are similar, you can just pull from yourself or from somebody. You can make them up too, but sometimes it can be harder, but if you can make them up from scratch, that's fine. But there's a lot of times where I'll kind of look at like the part of me that's kind of like Aaron or like Katie. And so you're not just like making every character yourself, because that's not right. But there's things like you find places that you're like, oh, this feels like something they would do also, like I think a lot of us had overlap with the characters, but like as a little kid, like I remember like chewing on my hair, or chewing on like the strings of my hoodies and stuff. And that felt like something specific and real. And so Aaron's like shirt collar is kind of stretched out and warped from being chewed on. Or I was a really picky eater growing up. And so the set dressing in the kitchen, the family has like more balanced meals that have like vegetables and like meat. And then Aaron has he has like mashed potatoes and like chicken nuggets that are supposed to look like they're from like takeout. Because I was like that as a kid, where I wouldn't eat anything and I just eat like brown food and starches and stuff. And so that's like, that feels like a little kid thing. And that feels like something I could see Aaron doing. And so you kind of put that stuff in. So you kind of find your areas of overlap. And if you don't have any overlap, you might have someone in your life that does. So maybe you're not like trying to copy anyone in particular, but you're like, what would this person, what would their house look like based on how I know they make choices? And you just have to try to find whatever tools you have to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes. Sometimes it's like relating a person to a movie character that might help. And that's helpful both with design and with set design. So you're trying to find areas that, real life can inform your set choices, and it can help them feel more real. And the first step to that is observing.
If you had to give, it's all right. If you had to give like a percentage to it, how much of yourself do you think is in this movie?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I put like a ton of myself into it. I don't know how to break it down into a percentage.
Or whatever is most comfortable with you, or metric. I don't know. I just picked percentages.
There's like a lot of me. I know there's a lot of the directors. There's pieces, of the team and everybody. But, there's some things where, I feel like there's some areas that I've got some overlap with Katie, and I put those things into it, and I'll put little details like from my house growing up, or my grandmother's house, or things that I find that are in there. So it's kind of in a lot of aspects of it. There's definitely some aspects that are not familiar, like the robot world is just kind of abstract and bold. So, I don't know. It's a good chunk, but hopefully too a good chunk from, everybody on the team that's working on it.
How did you feel like when the movie came out and like this response? I can't imagine like I mean, I'm 17 years old right now, so I haven't really worked
Yeah.
on anything big, but that must be like you were just saying like how global it is. I
Yeah.
can't imagine having that feeling.
Yeah. It's really crazy. It's super cool. No, yeah, it's been amazing. Yeah, we worked really hard on it. And you mentioned that I think some of the guys were saying it was like a student film being made at a big studio. And it really had that. I think we all put a lot of ourselves into it, and a lot of passion into it, kind of a lot of extra hours, maybe to a fault. But we worked really hard and it felt so personal. So having it be out in the world, I mean, first of all, it almost was surreal. Like this project, Mike and I had been on it since like 2015. So
Oh,
it's been
wow.
so long, and it was so long that it was also in this development stage where it wasn't greenlit. So I feel like we spent years being like unsure that it would ever even get to be made. And so
Wow.
that was kind of at the foundation. And so I feel like we felt really like grateful as we were in production. Like, are we actually doing it? We're making a real movie. Like we had this kind of first time energy. And I've worked on movies before, but I haven't been this close to them. Like I haven't designed a character for a feature before, and I haven't been like this much a part of the look. And so there's a part of you that's kind of feels vulnerable, like you feel a bit responsible. You're like, okay, if people hate this, it's maybe some of my bad choices or something like that, which I didn't feel. I'm really proud of the work we did, but there's a level of, yeah, you're a little bit exposed. This thing that was very kind of personal, and this thing that you were so close to for so long is streaming on Netflix for the whole world. So it's very, for me, it was very surreal to go through this for the first time. And it felt too also a little more surreal because of COVID. Like our original release date was supposed to be September of
Hmm.
2020. And then we, got pushed. And then that date was kind of unrealistic as
Yeah.
COVID played
Yeah.
out. And then it went to streaming. And then that had to, that date had to land. So there was so much ambiguity for a while. And then, yeah, and then it, went on to Netflix. And so that was super, yeah, it was just kind of surreal and super exciting. Like we were all looking really closely at reviews and fan art and seeing people respond to it. And it's the coolest thing. Like it's so beautiful to see, like I was talking about before, that reach that these films have, and how it's cool because I don't know if this is cheesy, but in the same way that like Katie's going off to college and there's that
Yeah.
relationship they
Uh-huh.
have, it kind of feels like our baby went off into the world. Like
Aw.
she's not like, I feel that too, even with her, where it's like, this was like our character. And now it feels like she has her own life. Like people are, I don't, you see like fan art of her, people kind of
Mhm.
adding more to her story, and people that are like, this is me completely. And this is me and my brother. And like, she's kind of out in the world and gets to kind of live in this other way that's brings like a new dimension to it. It's kind of cool. It's like, it
Man,
feels like, yeah, your little project's kind of gone off
that is
to
so cool. Oh
college
my
or
gosh.
something.
I wish
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
like just swim around in that feeling. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And I've been, yeah, so appreciative too of all the people that like say nice things about it or spend the time to do a drawing. It's really cool. And there's a lot of that stuff that we've on the team have seen, and it like, yeah, it's so meaningful.
Yeah, this movie, like, seriously, it's such a wonderful movie. I'm definitely like, I keep saying it's like one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a really fantastic movie. There's so
Oh,
much
thank you.
love in it, and it just shows. It's so cool. Um, oh yeah, just a quick side off question.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw that there's somebody made like Katie's YouTube channel, like the Katie Does Film Stuff thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I saw a comment that said, "I can't believe the producers of the movie actually like made a YouTube." Is that true? Did you guys actually make a YouTube channel?
I don't think that's us.
Okay, okay,
I
maybe.
don't think it,
Because
I
they're like
don't,
posting. Okay, they're like
or
posting like deleted behind the scenes stuff. So I'm like, are they real or are they not?
I should know this, or check. I
Yeah.
don't think it's us, because there's some things of mine. I've seen this channel. There's some things of mine that I've seen on there, and it's not like I like sent the file to someone
Hmm.
running it. I think it's somebody who's doing it which is funny because I'm like, oh, we missed that. We should have taken it. Because there's some things that if there was an account, we would try to like take it, but I think we missed that. And I might be wrong.
Yeah,
It
there's
might,
like a Pal Labs website and it said Sony on
yeah.
there. So I was like, okay, maybe this one is real.
The Pal Labs one is official.
Okay, cool.
And there's something that doesn't have anything on it, but that we have. I don't know if that's public information.
Okay, I'll
yeah.
cut it out if it's not. But yeah, I was just looking at like the Pal Labs thing and I was like, oh, they actually made a thing. That's so cool. And I spent like an afternoon like decoding more messages and I was like, oh cool, my gosh,
cool.
It's so fun.
That's cool to hear because there's a lot of times we were doing those where I'm like, are we lunatics? You know, because that Pal Labs website, if it's what I'm thinking of, there's like glitch frames in it.
Yeah.
And I think it might have at one point just had like numbers and it was like, we should put something, right? And then we usually have these sessions where we're doing art reviews, but half the time they would just turn into like Mike and Jeff like coming up with these crazy jokes and gags for it. And then we'd like, oh, we got to add this in at the last minute. And not that many people will like find it, but I feel like it pays off that if you do decode and find it, that it's something rewarding. You know, we didn't want it to be like, it needed to be like value added and not just like, it says like, you know, hi, like it needed to be something additive. And it's silly, but I feel like it's, you know,
I know. I can't wait for like other people to decode the stuff because when I was like decoding like the blueprints for the human pods, there's some really hilarious jokes on there. Yeah. I was like losing my mind. Yeah,
it's funny. I actually forget a lot of what they were. It's because I can't read it. At one point, actually, the designer that did they were all similar to the letters. So like an A would look like a triangle.
Yeah, that's one of the things that was hard for me and my brother to like decode because it was like, how are they doing this?
Yeah, no, so it was made it was made to feel like you could kind of make it out. And then there's a point that Mike was like, wait, this is going to be too easy. We should like scramble them more so that it's random and you can't look at it and read it. So they're just different symbols. We have a font that is, you know, we can type it out.
Oh, that's so cool. That's smart. Instead of like drawing, like I've just been drawing all those triangles. Which is a little bit hard. That's so cool. I really want to know. I think I have every letter except for like Y and X. I can't find them anywhere. Okay. But yeah, it's really, really cool. It's like so fun to see how Katie's design like changed so like drastically. She's so memorable and like specific, like how we talked about like the drawing on like her hands and clothes, like that stuff that I do all the time. It was so funny. And the way that you draw like hands and poses is so like grounded and real. Like
cool, thank you.
It's so cool. Like it's so like just grounded and real. Like these are like real people that I like know. How did you develop that? Or what kind of mindset shifts help you learn that?
I think I don't know, I observe a lot. It kind of relates to the caricature work that I like too. And I like trying to capture people. And I'm kind of always on that quest to like capture specific nuances. So sometimes that might be in like features and design choices, but a lot of the times it's in like mannerisms and posture and postures, hand positions, little quirks people do. I find that stuff kind of interesting. And I think to like we had kind of the creative goals of wanting things to feel really familiar. And I'm just super excited people are like, feels like people are relating and seeing themselves in it. And I feel like there's sometimes that some characters can be almost more like aspirational and a little less like real and a little less weird maybe. And so we had those goals of like, can this thing be a little bit more grounded and specific than usual? And so for me, sometimes it's reference. I'll do a lot of gathering reference. Sometimes it can just be real people that I know that might remind me of the characters. Sometimes it's actors. Sometimes it's just like kind of from my head. But I'll usually try to be really clear about the kind of direction from the directors about the characters. And I'm on that same kind of quest, kind of like with caricatures, to try to capture that. So like with Katie, there's tons of designs, but there was a phase that we were really like trying to find it. And I don't know that in most of those that I felt like we had cracked it either. So it becomes, I guess it's almost a little like obsessive from my end of like,
Yeah,
I haven't gotten it
wondering.
yet. It's not like real yet. Or she's do this. And you just kind of like keep digging. And so some of the poses just kind of come from your head as you're like imagining that person, things kind of come out. One of the things that helped in like the main final poses I have of Katie, that at that point, Abby Jacobson was cast for Katie, and she was doing like improv voice acting, and hearing her talk was like really helpful for me to get the character more. And so the poses that I did for Katie were over specific dialogue. And I haven't posted that on Instagram, but it's at some other places on social media.
It, and I was like, it totally blew my mind, because I was like, oh my gosh, so that's where that's from.
That,
oh my gosh.
That drove it. So that,
cool.
so in that case, it wasn't like I had photos of people doing something, but she's like, you know, for this next thing, we're going to need a whole lot of dog wigs. And it just felt like I could kind of see that, you know, I could kind of see that character acting that way. And I drew kind of how I'd imagine them. And, you know, sometimes too, like, you know, observation is huge. So like for advice for people, it's like drawing from life is really helpful. I know it's harder lately it's getting better now, but it's been harder with like COVID and stuff. But you know, I used to do a lot of cafe sketching. But
oh my gosh, yeah, I miss cafe sketching.
yeah. But like drawing people in meetings, drawing people wherever you can. I'm not sure the best places when we're not in public as much.
I usually pull up, there's like a live stream on like Times Square that you can find on YouTube or like different places. That's usually like where I go.
That's perfect. Yeah, there's a similar thing that at one point on Twitch I was watching. There's a stream that I think is 24/7 just going through Japan.
Oh, what? That's so cool. Oh my gosh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it might move too fast for like drawing people, but for like it's similar. So there's probably tons more things that I'm not thinking of right now, but where you can kind of do a fake version of people watching or a fake version of being out in the world. But yeah, I'll keep like sketchbooks and draw people. And sometimes those things might find their way into your work too. So that's I think a big thing for if you're trying to kind of capture characters. I think it starts with observing people.
Yeah, that is so cool. Back to like the reference that you did with Katie with Abby. Did you see Abby's what is that? Sometimes they record you in the booth too, and you can see the voice actor like act it out. Is that what you based it off of, or was it just like purely hearing it?
I only had audio.
That's really cool.
I honestly don't know. I've only heard audio of the voice talent. They might have recorded them. I don't know, like for animation, if they had recorded video of them to reference. I know that's like a thing they might have, but for me in that case, I just had like audio clips. And so it was just based off the dialogue.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm just very excited. It's just like really, really cool. It just definitely when I first like saw that video a couple of weeks ago, I was like, whoa, it just blew my mind how you can just like totally capture like the feelings and the voice and the emotions and her like poses and how she's sitting and the way that she like plays with her jacket. Like it's just so cool. It's just so cool.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
What's the lesson that's taken you the longest to learn? And this doesn't have to be art related.
I think something that's taken me a long time to learn might be like my limits or my boundaries. I think I can often underestimate how long things take and like over commit and take on a lot and feel like I can do, like, I think I've always been I don't know, maybe goal oriented. I've always like been very passionate about what I wanted to do as like a little kid. I don't know, I wanted to be an animator, and I did a ton of work and did tons of like poster contests and was doing a ton and very like ambitious and goal driven. And I'll do a lot, even in school, like high school, I would do a lot of extracurricular kind of projects or like art projects too for like school events. And I've always kind of done a lot and tried to do everything perfect, or try to do everything really well. And it's interesting having gone through doing production design, because there's so much that you're involved in. There's so much that you have to do. And that's really great because you kind of have like the support system of you're working with a whole team and you have other leads and stuff. But I think as kind of time goes by, I kind of realized too, like the importance of maybe saying no to certain things and kind of learning how to maybe take care of yourself as an artist and kind of give yourself space also, like space to be creative and space to be able to do life so that you're able to be fresh and inspired by things to put back into your work and to take breaks and, balance. I think there's times that I've put in balance and sometimes where I work really, really, really hard. And I like what I do. I think that can be hard with art because you get into it because you love it and then you make it your job. And sometimes it can be hard to draw boundaries of how much is this doing something what I love and how much of it is working really hard. And so I think I'm getting there, but it's like, how do you kind of get into good just habits of being a person and exercising
Yeah, for sure.
and being balanced?
Or has anything been helping? Like, how do you prioritize? Because that's also something that I go through too.
Yeah, I don't know that I do. I think that I'm saying it's the longest it takes me to learn because
Yeah.
I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get there now. I don't know. I think sometimes you kind of feel like you'll realize when you're kind of reaching your limits and then you kind of need to squeeze those things in. But I'm not the best at prioritizing when it's, I don't know, like full, like I'm going to go, I don't know, running every day and stuff like that. I'm kind of bad at that type of stuff and giving myself real structure and stuff. So those are my things that I'm trying to kind of get better at and learn. But I mean, I guess you asked about priorities and
How do you
I think
figure
that
out how to say yes to something or when to say no about something?
I think about the movie, for example, where prioritization is really huge because there's so many things you have to do. And if everything were to be perfect, everything's hopefully really good, but everything has to get done also. So you have to look at, I have this specific assignment. Sometimes the assignments you're working on an artist with, you have to do everything. So it might be like a label for a burrito or something. And we actually had a really awesome label for a burrito. That's why it came to mind that our artist Lily Nishida did that I love. That got cut. But you have times where like you're doing, like you have to get everything done. And it's not like it's me getting it done. It's like I'm working with the team, but you're preparing an assignment, you're giving feedback on it, you're looking at it, and you have finite hours in the workday, because you want to get things done in the workday, not be doing overtime all the time, just for like, but you have a finite amount of time, you have a finite schedule in production, you have things you have to design so that they can be modeled in time to feed the layout and the animation and everything. So you have such finite time and you have a lot to do. So I would have a lot of lists, and I had a really great like art coordinator who would help build me this like a document, like a Google Doc where I can number the priorities. They would change colors as they were important. So I was able to and I still do that stuff in my personal life, but I would do that for production work. And it was a mix of like, when does this thing have to be done? If it has to be done tomorrow, it's one. And I would also have to, I think this more relates to life, but there's sometimes that it's not going to be important to somebody else, but it's actually really important. So there's sometimes that I would have things that I'd really want to do. Like maybe it's a reference page or a guide for cloth or something, and no one's really asking for it. They might more be asking for this prop to be designed, but it's good. But I'd have to be like, oh, I need to do this thing for something to end up on screen. So there's sometimes that I'd have to be like, no, this needs to be done because I think it'll pay off. Or this thing is important because it's Katie's like t-shirt. And like that has so much screen time as our main character. So there's like a mix of um, finding priorities that are important and then kind of just being practical, like what needs to be done tomorrow and what thing if you don't do it tomorrow. Yeah, there's different ways you'll find what's a priority. But what was interesting to me is as a production designer, you have to prioritize all of the time and prioritize which things are going to get kind of the most care and which things you put a lot of care into, but you have to get done because production just kind of speeds up and stuff. And so I feel like that was the first time that I really had to be really specific about like, okay, this thing or stop, this thing is done. And really had to be really specific about priorities because time was so relevant. And it's funny because I feel like I don't know that I've thought about things in that way. It's almost like I feel like it was reminding me like, oh, wait, everything's really finite. This feels really finite because like you have real like layout schedules and animation schedules and you have a final release date, but like your life is very finite also. And we just don't really think of that. So it felt like I remember having times when I had to kind of realize that time on the project was really finite. And so if I wanted something in, I had to make it a priority. And it's really easy to kind of in your life, let the priorities be really scattered maybe. So I feel like some of those habits of making lists and reevaluating what things were most important to me. And if something got less attention, maybe it was because it mattered less. So I think with life, there's things like that where it's kind of important to kind of identify, I don't know, whether it's like the protagonist equivalent of your life, not necessarily that it's you, but like people in your life and family and activities. Like you kind of, it's probably important to find the things you want to be doing and make sure that they take up space so that like the little tasks that have to be done tomorrow don't steer away your bigger either goals or relationships and stuff.
Yeah, wow, that's like really, really good advice. Like, yeah, for sure. I was just talking about that with someone else recently about how I really love what you said about um the stuff that's like less important, it gets less attention, so it's probably like not that important anyways. That was really, really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Um, when is the last time that you created without fear, and how did that affect your work?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I've been, I worked on the Mitchells for a long time. So I feel like that kind of comes to mind, you know, whether it's that project or parts of it. Like, I feel like things like coming up with a look for Katie Vision and her film style was like kind of fearless. Like with that, we were doing like doodles on final expensive gorgeous renders and that there I guess could have been elements of fear with that and maybe some of like is this going to be too weird or are these going to be distracting or silly or something in a way that's not productive, but we just aimed for it to like have a story purpose and we're intentional about it. And I think kind of got rid of any fear by being really like intentional and thoughtful about it, hopefully authentic about it. And I think the fear kind of went away, whether it was fear that we had or maybe outside fear about it working or fear about, you know, the production difficulties that can be involved with that. I feel like some of those existed. And I think we, you know, where there were obstacles, we just found ways to like create pipelines or systems to support us. And I think ultimately that stuff, kind of like we said before, I think as you do things that might put you in a place where you feel a little bit of fear, I think you can kind of get exciting results from it.
That's really, really, really cool. It's so clear that I've already mentioned this, but this movie just has so much fun, like at its core, and there's like so much passion that goes into it. I get so excited because it's just so cool. I'm wondering, what did you learn like by making it or while making it? Like how did you change as a person? Like from what did you say, like 2015 or
Mm-hmm.
something to now? That's insane.
I guess in the process, I feel like I learned a lot about like storytelling and filmmaking from observing the process so closely. It was really exciting to, be in meetings with like the creative team and the leads and get to like, yeah, make a movie together. I feel like I had more experience in the specific like art department tasks or maybe viz dev with the director, but I think it's quite different when you're really like making a movie in sequences and
Hmm.
shots and talking about camera work and also things that don't really directly affect me, but just kind of hearing the directors talk about. It could be an acting thing, which I don't have any like really experience or relationship with it. It's in my work as much as it brings a character to life. So there's like poses and some things that relate to acting, but things like timing and editing and all of that
Hmm.
stuff aren't so much relevant when you're like as a production designer. They're a little bit less a part of your job. Some of it is a part of it, but being exposed to those was super interesting because I hadn't been around that as much. And so just kind of hearing the conversations and stuff and being involved in the process as it's more about filmmaking and less about still images, I think is really exciting. So I feel like there's a lot I've learned from that process that I think kind of affects how I make choices now in still images, just kind of having more exposure to like the process of filmmaking and the feedback that made the movie better along the way, like from our like from Chris Miller and Phil Lord, from our producers and stuff. There's a lot I feel like about storytelling that it was nice to hear and kind of soak up. And yeah, there's just a lot you learn. You learn a lot. You have so many specific assignments that you just kind of learn more about everything and learn more too about really working with people and trusting your team and building a team. Um, yeah, there's just a lot that's really cool about the job.
That's really, really cool. How do you feel like you changed as a person? Or I guess it's a long time, so you must have changed a lot. So
Yeah, no, I think so. I think, yeah, and I think there's, you talk about fear a lot. So I think like finding confidence in yourself and in your voice and um, growing, growing too to trust yourself. I feel like in the beginning, I might have felt more self-conscious about being like a first-time production designer that hadn't done it. And I feel like throughout the process, that starts to like not matter. It just is like, oh, this is my job. I get the look of the movie. It's like what I'm building, and those things don't matter in any way to like hold you back. And I think kind of, yeah, you gain confidence in ways. I think working with the team too, it's like I think in the beginning, maybe I had more insecurities about like, I've definitely worked with people that have way more experience than I do, or like masters in their specific craft and stuff. And I think when I started, I had maybe more vertigo about that. Um, but I think once you kind of dive in, it's just interesting to kind of see how it's the collaboration is so much people bring their like specific eye and talents and skills. And, you know, in my job, I'm visually kind of, you're like designing the movie and looking at the big picture. And not everybody will have that big picture and the kind of rules of the world. So it's like you're just working together to kind of get all these big picture goals so that it can be a cohesive film. And it ends up being like, oh, I know this movie, or I know what this should be, and I know why. And you're kind of sharing that information, and you're taking the best of their work and you're infusing it with what it needs to be. So then when it plays into the whole, it's additive to the whole, and it makes the story all work better. So it's like you're kind of that between and kind of getting the story, the visual storytelling and the story needs in on screen, and then you're kind of supported by a lot of really talented people, and then you're just collaborating, and it's just fun. A lot of people don't really have egos in the business too. A lot of people are really grateful to be able to do creative work like we do, and most people are all just really excited to solve these problems together. And so it's like I gained more confidence in that, more comfort in it, and it was a really great process.
That's so cool. How do you keep that big picture in mind? Because I imagine like there's so many little parts to a movie. How did you
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
yourself like grounded in that?
um I guess you like in a way you start broad, you start forming the kind of broad ideas in the beginning. So I think you just kind of have to keep that in mind, and then as you're looking at specific details, it's always there. Like there's kind of some simple core concepts. They always kind of break down and get more and more specific, but you kind of hold those core concepts with you. And then that's kind of your filter for how you're responding to things and giving feedback to them. But you do have to like do everything. So
Is
it's
there
like,
anything that like you didn't know, like how it was gonna turn out, and that you had to like, I don't know, you were talking about earlier how there were some parts that you like didn't know or didn't get that other people like pieced together. How did you like, how was that experience?
um, I'm sorry, could you ask that one more time?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let me say it before I forget. Um, so I'm asking, like, for example, maybe for like a scene or something,
Mhm.
you weren't you yourself like you weren't sure about like how it should play out or its function or
Mm.
something. Like you didn't
Mhm.
know how it related to the big idea or something like that. How did you, since the animation thing is like super collaborative, how did you communicate that like I don't know what to do with this, help me, that sort of thing, but like keep it within the
Yeah.
big ideas?
Yeah, like I guess it's like if it's a set, like for example, if we're talking about something like with my art department, there's a set that couple sets I guess that come to mind within the robot world. One of them is not in the final movie, and one of them is. It's like the room that Rick goes onto, to that giant phone to go on
Hmm.
YouTube. A lot of those set pieces were really hard logistically because the scale is really, really big and we cheat a lot of things. And at one point, like Linda like jumped off the rock, like slid down the rocket,
Hmm.
which when you're in 3D and you have like a giant thing, you can't get away with some of the same cheats. So there'd be times that we're like trying to design a set that has to accommodate for action, and it's hard, or like that room that they get into, the logistics of getting them over to it and jumping into it and not having it feel like they would like die.
Yeah.
Like there's just logistics that are like challenges where you're like, I don't know how to do this exactly. And like for those, like in those examples, like we had a brilliant designer or different designers on those sets, and I feel like we would just kind of spend longer in those check-ins, and it was really casual where I remember one of the artists had like a little couch by his desk, and me and the art director would sit there, and I feel like we're talking about, okay, well, it has to be it's like a puzzle where, especially
Hmm.
for those sets where you're like, okay, it needs to be really streamlined. It can't be a thing that's protruding out, but it needs to be protruding out so he falls.
Hmm.
And then my art director Toby, he's like doing sketches in his sketchbook, and we're figuring it out together, and you're kind of solving a puzzle. And I feel like at those points, none of us really knew what it should be, but like it has to be streamlined, it has to be bold, it has to be
Oh, cool.
geometric, because those are things you've had established about the world. So there's always some level of things that it needs to be. And it's in our, yeah, you just have certain story needs, and then you have your visual needs, so that it's cohesive with the visual storytelling. And you kind of work it out together, and sometimes you don't get it right, like in our process we're working on assignments with the art team, and then me and my art director giving feedback, and then we present it to the directors when things are ready, and there's times that they're like, oh yeah, it's got to be more like this, and Mike and Jeff have like strong points of view and are great storytellers. So they'll give us feedback too. So there's sometimes that we might do something and they're like, oh, wait, no, it's got to be more like this. And maybe sometimes they're changing things in the story. So there'd be sometimes that the tone might change. And usually we're, communicating about that stuff, but maybe there's sometimes when they're moving quickly and something might be changing. And so we have those meetings with them. And so there's sometimes that maybe a story needs changed, or maybe there was like a different idea there, or maybe there's different needs for comedy. And so, if something's not right, you'll get notes like, hey, this isn't right. Can it be more of this? Or can it be like more, I don't know, like, can it be bolder? Or can it be more streamlined? And, the directors and I work really closely together. So we're kind of all on the same page. So it's usually like, oh yeah, that you're right. We could go harder. Like we've been looking at it too closely, and maybe they're like, make it more crazy or more bold. And then you keep working on it, like it's an iterative process.
Yeah, that is so cool. That's a fantastic explanation. I love that. Is there a project that you're putting off because of fear? Or maybe like a personal project or something that you're working on?
Maybe. I have a lot of projects that I want to do that I haven't done. Part of it's like, I feel like for not having enough time or organize my time, but it's funny. I don't know if it's fear, but maybe fear shows up by like avoiding or distracting and you don't realize it's fear. But some things like I would like to do is I'd love to like do like books or try like children's books or try
that's cool.
print. Because I haven't really done that. I haven't done like real illustration work, even though sometimes I think of myself as an illustrator, but I haven't really like illustrated. So there's things that I would kind of like to try like that. And maybe there's an element of fear with that. Like that's a totally different world. It's like, it seems like similar skills and similar storytelling, but it is like a different world. And I've kind of dabbled in trying things, but haven't really like leaped into anything like that. So that comes to mind, but I always have a lot of different projects I want to do. And yeah, like there's things that I would like to do more of what I have written on my lists that go neglected. But yeah, I think this is a good interview and a good question, because I think it does kind of provoke like, oh yeah, what things are fear-based and what things would be good to get yourself out of your comfort zone, because I think I have a lot of projects I would like to do that are kind of sitting on the side.
Yeah, what kind of stuff? I'm curious, like, you worked on so much. What would be like, I guess this is one of those boring interview questions of like, what's next? But like, what's next? But what are you excited for in the future?
I guess I'm excited. It's interesting because the Mitchells was like a lot of the things I wanted to do. So I think there definitely was a point for me that I'm like, what is next? Or what things do I want to try as an artist? I think there's a part of me that does like kind of learning and then not completely reinventing, but kind of finding a next thing. So I feel like I think for me as an artist, I think I'll need some time and space to kind of like evolve myself, like I haven't been doing as much art lately, honestly, having kind of finished the movie and been being pretty busy. But I think, kind of finding my voice now. I feel like I've had my voice, but I feel like some of the stuff now I'm in a little bit of a different place. So I think kind of finding that me of 2021, I guess. And I'm sorry. And I think just doing different projects as artists, like I think some projects that tap into some of the different things I like that maybe were less a part of my last project. So like I love caricature and I keep trying to find like places for that. So I have some personal project ideas for caricature projects, but maybe there's some projects eventually that utilize elements of caricature more, and the more kind of pushed weirder stuff that I like to do also. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm excited for whatever you get to do or whoever you get to be. That's really cool. One of my previous guests actually came up with this question. He said from the start of your career to now, where I guess like
Mhm.
you have a movie out or like a bunch of movies out and you're like successful, I guess, whatever that definition means to you. Um, what have you forgotten that your past self would remind you of if they saw you now?
Mm,
It's a big question, so take all the time you need.
yeah. um, Sorry, I think I'm like glitching.
That's okay, it's
I
fine.
think, yeah. No, I think my past self might just remind myself to like remember like why I started in the first place and why I kind of started making art. And yeah, it'd be interesting to have a conversation with another version of of myself.
Yeah.
I feel like I like the thing I like about I don't know, life and aging is, yeah, I feel like you gain so much like wisdom and you learn more about yourself. And there's a lot that I really, really value about that. And I think I do forget about the most valuable things of, you know, your younger versions of yourself. And I feel like there's a lot of I don't know, like rawness and honesty at those places too. So I think I'd be kind of, yeah, curious to have that conversation. And maybe there's some things I've forgotten about why I kind of first liked making art, but it could be good to kind of check in on those
Ooh.
things, you know,
So
and see if you're
why
on
did you
track.
start? Did that change at all? Like from now? From then to now?
Well, I don't know. I was so young. So I don't know. I think it just was like, I'd like to do this. You know, it was pretty simple. It was like, I like to make art. I like
Yeah, yeah.
colors. I liked
Hmm.
birds and I like to draw birds and I would draw like birds and sunsets and
Oh,
Disney
that's cute.
characters. Yeah. Like, I think one thing that maybe comes to mind now from saying that is I think I overthink things a little too much. Like everything I draw, I always feel like it needs to be a part of a project. And I like that. Like I like projects and I like art and design when it has like a story that it's telling and it helps me drive choices. But there's something that's nice about when you're, I mean, this is really young, but like when you're a kid, you're just making it because you like want to make a picture.
Hmm.
And you know, you're doing because you like doing it. And I like doing art still too, but I think it's always a part of something else, or it's part of a project. And so I think there probably is value in that like free image making, or you're making, you know, as a kid, it was more like almost like fan art because you're drawing from a movie. And I haven't really done things like that. I feel like I'm usually, yeah, more project based. So I think there's probably some things that are interesting to reflect on about just making things that we like and drawing things that we like.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. Um, yeah, that's really cool. What helped you get out of your comfort zone?
I think getting outside of my comfort zone, I think just excitement about the medium sometimes. Like I think about getting outside of my comfort zone. Maybe it's college and I'm doing 3D animation. I feel like I was excited about learning new tools and like how can we break them or can I do something different? And I think in the Mitchells it was a little bit of the same of just being excited about an opportunity, you know, like I think in both of those examples, like in college, it's like you get to make a student film and it feels
Mhm.
rare in your life that you have that dedicated time to do it. It's so much harder to squeeze it in when that's not your sole focus. And so it's like, oh, when am I gonna get this opportunity? You know, and then with this, it's like, oh, when else do you have this opportunity of everything aligning in this way that we're making this movie? And like, why not, yeah, get outside of our comfort zone and like take advantage of those opportunities. So I feel like kind of chasing the moment or the opportunity or excitement can kind of help, I think,
Yeah, for
push
sure.
you outside of your comfort zone.
Did you have anyone who like helped you overcome fear?
Um, Maybe my family. I have a pretty good support system from artists. And you know, my sister is an artist. My father was a musician and my mother was very supportive of the arts and creativity. And I feel like having other, whether it's family or other friends that are artists, I feel like there's I don't know, support and people you can kind of talk to about things. And I think those things can kind of help, get you outside of your comfort zone and help inspire you to, you know, take risks and be a little bit more fearless with your art.
That's a really good answer. We're coming up to the end of the interview, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. What is the most fearless thing you've ever done? And it doesn't have to be art related. One dude, like, he went skydiving. Other people, someone was in a kazoo band. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, I've got a lot of, this is like one of my favorite questions. Yeah.
Something that comes to mind was there was one day that I bought a flight to Japan, like for the next day.
Oh, whoa.
And that was kind of cool. Like I had a friend that was in Japan at the time, and he was like, oh, you should come visit. And so I'd thought about it. But the day that I decided to go was like a Friday, and I bought a ticket for a Saturday and hopped on a plane. And the next day I was in Japan, and it was pretty cool. And I feel like there was something, almost empowering about that, of like, oh wait, the world is accessible. You know, there's obviously like cost associations with things, but it was like, oh yeah, can I just do something and like not put the planning and the logistics and things, in the way. So yeah. And, I was fortunate in a place that like I was able to buy it. And it was actually not more. The plane was kind of empty. So I think I lucked out, and it wasn't like a super expensive flight. But that was something that I did kind of fearlessly or impulsively. And I think there's times I've done some things like that. And that sense of like control, maybe it's like, oh, I'm just going to get in my car and drive somewhere, which I haven't done that in a while, but I feel like there's times that I've kind of, decided I'm going to get up and go. And it's really freeing. Like if you wake up early and you find yourself like other side of the state or something, it's kind of nice to feel that sense of control of like, I can't just do this, and I think that there's probably ways that relates to art too, that like kind of just do it. Don't worry if, there's obviously some things like I was fortunate that my coworker at the time was Japanese. And so he was like, oh, you should do this and this and this and go to like little Tokyo and get this thing. And then you're good to go. So like, I did a little bit, but it was
wow,
very,
that's
like,
so cool. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be like a flight somewhere, but I think if there's ways that you can kind of do something you want to do and maybe not procrastinate about it, because why not? There's like, kind of like we talked about before, scheduling, there's finite time in projects, but there's finite time in life too. So if there's something you want to do and put off doing, I think when you can kind of jump into them, it's usually pretty rewarding. And sometimes it's not, but then you learn something.
Yeah, for sure. That is something like I'm just learning, because like I'm 17 and I'm only like just now starting to learn how to drive. It's like insane to me. I was like having a conversation with my mom yesterday. You mean I can go to the grocery store if we ran out of chips on my own? Are you kidding me? Yeah. And also, like the song from the movie, I've been playing that all the time. Like, it's something like that's just, it's so cool to have that kind of, like we have that finite time, and it feels like everything's out of our control really for the most part, but then it's not for these like small things, and that's basically it.
Right. And it's gaining your relationship with that, because a lot of things aren't like, most things probably aren't in your control, but some things are. Yeah, like you can go buy a bag of chips and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, and I think it's finding ways to get creative with what you do have. Like I found that too, like working on a movie, you find that you have limitations, so, in different ways. Sometimes it's something like schedule. Sometimes it's like resources, like maybe it's a budget thing that puts some constraint on like a set or something like that. But in general, when you're making things, you might have limitations of like the medium you have. Maybe you only have like pencils accessible to you, but there's limitations in anything. And I think it's interesting when you work within those limitations. Sometimes you come up with solutions that you wouldn't have thought of. Like maybe you don't have any art supplies, and then you find that like, I don't know, you can use like food. I don't like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's somebody somewhere that like didn't have any art supplies, but they made like a drawing out of positioning food on a plate. Like, I don't know there, but when you have limitations, you might make different choices. So learning how to work within boundaries is really useful. And I think in life you have, definitely a lot of different parameters. And it's like, how do you let that be something that's interesting? There's a version of getting fearful about what parameters you might have, but I think when you can find places to like work within it, and maybe use parameters, or maybe it's a weakness you have, use it as find a way to use it as a strength, which might not come immediately, but like we've talked about before, kind of practice and doing things wrong and failing, and you'll kind of grow and get there. Yeah.
Wow, that's really good advice. I love that a lot. What would you say to someone who struggles with fear in their work?
I guess I'd say if someone's struggling with fear in their work, to just try to be authentic to themselves. I feel like that's one thing you can be confident in, is that like you're your best asset. So if you can tell your story, tell your point of view, like it's going to be either like different than other people's, and you'll put something different into the world. And in the ways that it's not different, it's also kind of positive, because sometimes it's a different take, but it's going to resonate with different people that have a different but similar experience. Or, I think just being authentic to yourself, or just being authentic, things usually land, they usually resonate. And so I think as fear is weighing you down, it's like, look more inward and less outward. Like try to hone your craft, be like passionate about what you want to do, but try not to worry too much about other people and what other people are doing or other people's success, but kind of, look kind of towards yourself and what you can offer. And if someone's done something really cool, like it exists in the world, and now like, what are you going to bring to add to the world? Like, you don't need to do what someone else is doing, because it's already, if you've seen it, it's already done. Like what can you bring, and what of your voice can you bring? And you're not going to have it right away. So you can just kind of practice to try to like, find your voice. And I think kind of looking inward can kind of help.
That's really cool. What's a common myth that students have about like working or doing production design or character design in the animation industry or in general?
Maybe a myth could be that you like that you have to have all the answers. Might be it. Like as a character designer, like I designed characters for the movie, but I wasn't doing it alone. I was getting feedback from the directors. I was getting, ways like, can you push it in some way? Here's some reference. So it's really collaborative. Like if you're hired, in an art department, you're not having to solve each problem completely on your own. You have like your art leadership team and your peers. And so there's a lot that'll be learned. People are also really, generous, I feel like, with, within the teams to, give feedback, to kind of collaborate and stuff. So, you work hard and you kind of have your best portfolio and put your best foot forward, but there's a lot of things too that you don't need to be, we're talking a lot about fear. You don't need to be perfect. A lot of it too, it will grow to be the perfect thing for the movie, for like, the feedback from art leadership, feedback from the directors, feedback from the studio, and things grow into that, to that final design. And so, yeah, you have that support of the team when you're doing like team projects.
What do you wish that you were taught about like the industry or like working with a team of people?
I don't know if this is like, I wish I would have been taught, but something that I think as a production designer, I learned more about was like how much of getting something in the final product isn't just drawing it or doing a note for, but so much of it lives in relationships and conversations. And like for my role, this I think more applies to leadership maybe, but like my relationship with the different like department heads and that open communication is a lot of what gets something on screen, and I feel like that's something that you might hear advice or feedback that's kind of like the practical side of it, but I think it's nice to know, and for people to know that, yeah, that those relationships are where a lot of that stuff is built too. And so I think that's something, yeah, that's kind of nice to know. Yeah, like how much you're, like, I feel like my relationship with our head of story is seen on screen, our kind of conversations and our relationship. That's part of why, like, some of the characters are the way they are, some of the choices. So there's things like that too that I don't know that people always talk about, but personal relationships are really big. Sometimes it's like the relationship you have with the art department and the teams and that they have with each other, like as you form like natural friendships. It doesn't have to be like building a networking community, but as people have those friendships, they're also like becoming better artists as they're looking at each other's work and collaborating or painting for fun on the weekends. So I think it's important too, like, especially if we're talking about maybe someone who's in college. It feels like you're almost a little bit more singular in a way, where you're doing your project, your portfolio, you're with your friends and everything. But I feel like you haven't, depending on your curriculum maybe, but if you haven't worked with people, I feel like maybe it's not as clear, like just how important that stuff is and how much your relationships kind of play into making these things and communication and all of that stuff. It's not just the skill of your work. You could have really great work, but if you're not able to communicate with it about people or trust people or collaborate, it only goes so far. So you need all those things in your portfolio, but it's also really important, the collaboration of it.
How did you communicate your ideas? Because that's something that's really hard for me to do.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember that before, when I'd have friends ask me like how I did art, when I was younger. And I feel like I had no I really had no clue how to explain it. But yeah, no, I think from having time doing it and having time like doing presentations and stuff when I was more of a younger development artist, I feel like with practice, you kind of get the hang of it. Like in art school, you'll find yourself critiquing work more, talking about work more. So I feel like in the college era, you get a little bit more comfortable. When I started college, I had no idea how to really like articulate what I was doing and why, and really, and but you gain a little bit of that language in art school, I feel like. And then, on the job, you see people, I would see like my art leadership talking about things and how they would talk about things. They're more experienced artists. And then so when I was on the job as a production designer, I would visualize things. And when I would work with the team, a lot of it was kind of intuitive. I would try to do like a style guide. And
oh yeah, okay, yeah. I remember seeing like the different hands and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I would pull a lot of reference images. Really help to be clear, because you can say, for example, I want this to be hand drawn and have line work, but people don't know what is line work. Like,
that's
people's
true.
lines are different. Like, is it an ink line? Is it a pencil line? Is it someone with like a soft, delicate hand? Or is it someone who's like, really carving the lines? Is it lines on paper? Is it, so like,
Yeah.
things can mean a lot of things when you say like hand drawn or when you say familiar,
Yeah.
So you have to be very clear. And so part of it was like when I was doing development art, I had some images, so I could point to some of those, but I would gather a lot of reference. I would gather a lot of photo reference from photographers that had work that felt observed in ways that were relevant to the movie. So you can find reference images faster than you can paint them. So you find reference images that explain your point, and it's a way to be clear. And so I would do stuff like that, like gather reference images and kind of explain why, or circle things, or there'd be like pages where it's like set dressing page and here's examples. And I'm writing notes for like why this specific thing feels like it works and how that might relate to us. And then it's like, I'd give with the art team, like a presentation on that. Then I'd give them those files. And then like, as we're working, some things become kind of dynamic where you realize like, oh, this is something that's not clear. So I might need to do something to make this more clear. And then you're doing like draw overs and feedback, to kind of get everybody on the same page. Because that's one of the challenges too, is if you have a lot of artists, everybody's super talented, but in their own unique ways. And it has to feel like a cohesive look. So
Mhm.
you have to kind of bring things all together so it feels like a singular movie and not like, different in every scene. And then, and so it's a lot of kind of building those examples. And then eventually the work that they do is those things. And so by the time you're working in 3D, when you say like, I want it to be hand drawn, you're like, I'm like cutting out sections of people's paintings and saying like hand drawn like this, and here's how this thing is like thick and thin, here's how this thing is wobbly, and I'm like putting notes on top of visuals from the team and showing those to people. So part of it's in visuals, and then part of it's in communication, because someone might see it and then ask you a question and then you're responding to it. And so some of the information might start to live in people's minds from that conversation you're having as you're talking about the work, like especially with the 3D team. When we look at stuff and can annotate on the spot, they have like a system where you can take it and draw on it, and you just start to collaborate. And so there's a back and forth, and then the style guide lives in that way. But then it does also start and live in a like packet, like a packeted way.
Yeah, that is so cool. Oh my gosh, that's really great advice. I just got done with a project where I was collaborating with someone who wasn't like a drawing artist, and I didn't know what I was doing. So that's really nice to hear, because I just made a bunch of Pinterest boards and sent them over.
Oh,
That kind
cool,
of stuff, and
cool.
it really helped. Wow, that's so
Yeah,
cool. That's
yeah,
really, really good advice. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're on to the last question.
Cool, cool.
Awesome. So, what is something that you thought was scary, but you were
Mhm.
able to overcome or get through?
Something that comes to mind, um, not sure if it's the best example, but I'll do like non-art, is I moved in with my grandmother after I worked at DreamWorks, which is like not scary and great, but I'm I'm half Mexican,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't grow up like fluent. I knew like a little bit, but my grandmother, and I think especially with old age, didn't like speak English really. Like she could say a little bit, but I moved in with her like not speaking Spanish. And I don't know that it was scary because it was like my grandmother, but I feel like things like that, like learning a language maybe is a place that I feel like I have more fear. Like speaking of fear, I feel like I'm pretty confident with art. Like I'll like put a pen to a paper without a drawing underneath, and I'm my most confident, I think, in that space. But things like learning a language and you
Hmm.
mess up and you can't sound the way you want to sound. Like there's a huge gap between like what you want to say and what you can when you're like
Yeah,
learning a
yeah, yeah, for
language,
sure.
and so in her world too, a lot of her neighbors and friends it was dominant in Spanish. And so there was a lot of situations too where I'm having to navigate them with not the full skill set to do
Hmm.
that. And it's not just imposter syndrome, but you're like, oh, I literally can't say what I need to
Yeah, yeah.
say. And she was a elderly woman, and there were times that she was having like health problems and heart attacks, and you're like, okay, I really need to know how to speak this language enough that like everybody's okay.
Yeah,
And I feel
yeah.
like I got really like dedicated to like, okay, I'm gonna get some workbooks, watch some novellas with her, and I'm really gonna like, I've always wanted to be better at this, and like, let's really do it. And so, I don't know that that was like a scary space, but I feel like in times in my life, like I noticed that with language, like, yeah, there's fear there. And I think it was cool to jump into a situation like that. For some people, that might look like, I don't know, spending time in a country that's, speaks the language you want to speak that you don't know how to speak. And I find that that's traveling, and language is a really, I think, helpful way to see that you like have to be outside of your comfort zone. You're in a different world. And like, there's something that can be, I think, interesting about learning that like you kind of have to navigate in that fear and insecurity, but you get better, and I came a long way, and live with her for several years, and I'm still a little like awkward, but can say that I'm like fluent now, with some like, awkwardness to my Spanish for
Hmm.
sure. But that's something too, where it's like, yeah, just do it and you'll figure it out. Like I kind of went and like, well, I guess I'm going to figure this out. Like I'll learn Spanish while I'm there.
Hmm.
And I did. And so I think that, when you can, yeah, put yourself in a place of fear, um, whether it's what you're passionate about or just something like that. It's it's nice to kind of push yourself to grow and try to get comfortable in those uncomfortable places.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I love that. I totally relate because like I grew up as like an Indian, I'm first generation Indian, and I don't know, I'm really trying to learn the language. Like I have my practice sheets over there right now. It is hard. It is scary. Like and it's weird to grow up in that like kind of environment. Like I remember I used to spend the summer like in India, and one of the family members who didn't speak English, I don't think, she was really surprised that I could eat with my hands and not use like a spoon like an American. Yeah, that's just like really, really interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
this has been amazing. You're awesome. Like this is so much fun. Thank you for being here. Do you have like your contact information or places that people can find your work or anything you're trying to promote?
I guess just my normal social media, my Instagram is my name, Lindsey Olivares, and same on Twitter, and same on my website, just my name. And nothing specific to promote. I've been promoting the movie, but that's kind of out into the world and done. So maybe follow me on social media, and hopefully at some point I'll have some new projects to promote. I think this is a good conversation to kind of inspire, doing those different projects.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. It was so much fun to chat with you.
Yeah, likewise. No, just thank you. I really appreciate like your time and all the thoughtful questions. It's really like good and kind of provoking. Oh,
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I try to ask like different questions than the typical like, oh, when did you start drawing? That sort of stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. We're just gonna wave bye to the audience. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye.